Well, greetings, all of you who may be joining live or you're watching the replay. I want to give you a special invitation today to join into something very unique, and I hope you want to be a part of it. I can honestly say, in my 40 plus years of Christian service, including 21 years pastoring, this is unlike anything that I've ever been involved in or saw take place. But I want to share a story with you today. Welcome you to this brand new Facebook page and YouTube channel, Edifications by Ed Hanna. And today we're going to talk about a story of a gold mine. And so I encourage you, just pull up a chair, sit a little bit, and I want to share three very unique stories with you today, but they're all connected. So join me, if you will, as we dive into this story. And I want, by the end of it, you should be able to answer the questions you may already have of who is Ed Hanna? What is this Edifications by Ed Hanna? And what is the story of a gold mine? There are many in the area that I live in that will know the surroundings that I'm going to talk about of Hale Gold Mine. And so as we go through, we encourage us to, I want you to do something. Take a look at this picture frame. I know it's blank. You've probably seen them sitting around. Maybe we had some for your own self. And they're triple frames. But you see there are hinges in between. They're connected. And so I'm going to tell you three stories, and then we're gonna see if these things make one full picture. So here's what I want you to do. Use your imagination a little bit with me. The frame on the left, when I go through this first story of the gold mine, I want you to place it right there, just kind of like putting it in a picture frame, and just leave it hanging there. And then when I get through the second story, we're going to do the same thing. By the time I get to the end, I want you to have three different pictures in your mind, and each one fitting in one of these frames. And hopefully, by the time we get to the end, some of this may make a little bit of sense to you. So let me just jump right in. I'm going to put several things on the screen and read them to you and make comments as we go. But let's dive into it. Let me just say nearby where we live in Lancaster, South Carolina, and in Lancaster County, just north of Kershaw, it's a gold mine, Hale Gold Mine. And so this is the history of that gold mine. Now we're only about maybe 15 minutes from there. And so let me jump back and give you a little bit of history. And hang on. Remember, this is going in your first frame. So you're going to need this to make the picture. 1827, 20 years before the California gold rush, there was gold found on property just north of Kershaw on the property of Captain Benjamin Hale. And it's in Lancaster County. It was just outside of Kershaw. And Captain Benjamin Hale, he came from Virginia. He bought 22,000 acres. Now he wasn't a miner. He didn't know anything about gold or mining. He was a planter, and so he bought this huge amount of acreage, and he had no idea that there was gold on the property. But along the way, of course, remember this is 20 years before the gold rush in California, and so when gold is discovered, obviously you're gonna follow after that. And so I'm going to skip a lot of that history, but by 1837, 10 years later after he bought the property, they came to the place to create or build a stamp mill there on the property because of the gold that they were finding there during that time. And they operated that for several years. And when in 1865, during the Civil War, Sherman's troops came through and they wrecked the mining operation on their march north. In 1866, the Hale family passed from the scene, and it was no longer being operated because of the Civil War. So in 1880, a New York group resumed operations there on a lot larger scale. And right around the turn of the century, 1904, Dr. Thies retired, and his son, Ernst, known as Captain, took over the operations. And 4 years later, there was a boiler explosion that killed Captain and another man as well, and injured several others and destroyed the main mill. So it took a couple of years. By 1910, the mill was repaired and some operations resumed. And until not long after that, in April 1910, there was another accident that killed two men and badly injured the superintendent. So the mine operations went quiet for a lot of years. And for the next 100 years, the mine would be operated on and off for several different owners. And remember now, mining in that day was a lot of hand stuff. There wasn't a lot of machinery, tools, and technology. So 1942, World War II shut down the mine. And after that, inflation caused the reopening of the mine just not to be worth it. It wasn't profitable. So from 1934 to 1985, they had three different owners. They were all New York groups, different groups that owned the mine during that time period. Here's a few pictures. I can't tell you anything about who's in it or the dating. There's a few that I was able to get online. You can't find a lot of pictures of the history of it, but just a few of the older pictures that came from Hell Gold Mine back in the day. So from 1972 to 1992, now that's when I knew the mine. As I said, we stayed about 15 minutes from it. I grew up in Columbia till my mid-teens. Then we moved to this area. My mother actually was born and raised there in Flat Creek, which is all around that mine property. My grandparents lived on property that Hell Gold Mine owns now. It's not an active mine, but it is actually just across. You can stand on the property and see the piles where they've extracted. So it is a part of the mine at this time. But during that time, there was a geologist, Earl Jones, that came to Kershaw, and he had a passion for the mine. He'd heard about it, and he teamed up with a truck driver and farmer, Jack Robinson. And where I formerly stayed and where I stay now, just kind of in between that is where he and his family lived. And so he would later acquire that mine, but they didn't really do anything with it. And so in the mid to late 70s, as a teenager, we would ride through the dirt roads of the vacant mine. And let me just tell you just a little bit, as that mine, there was no gates or anything. It was just a off a little paved road. There was a couple of dirt roads that went through, not a big, huge area. And dirt roads were still there. There were still holes, and most of them had water in them. I remember there's like a blue hole, a green hole, red hole. They had different colors to them. And there were stories, of course, about, they said that that's where the miners hit water. They filled up with water. They said that there was equipment in the bottom of some of them. They may very well be. And there were some that go down and go swimming in the holes. And I rode through there and looked many times, but I never jumped in that water. I wasn't sure if I'd have any skin left or not. But I can't find a lot of pictures of that time. But this is one that I came across, and that was pretty much the state that it was in the 70s, when I and others as teenagers would ride through that area. So time goes on a little bit. In 2007, Remarco Minerals purchased Hell property. They began extensive exploration, drilling, the permitting process, and buying up land around it, and that sort of thing. And when this began, I started following Remarco Minerals online as close as I could. And I read their history and watched the progress of the things that were taking place. And so when I found out when they were doing exploration drilling, they were drilling to a depth of 750 feet. And the reports I was seeing was every place they drilled on the property had a significant amount of gold in it. And so they started reaching out to buy more property around it. And at this time, there were many houses. I said my grandparents' house was right across the property, which they own now. But most of the houses in that area, they bought one entire street that ran in front of the mine. That they owned all the property, and so they were able to shut that road down, Snowy Owl Road, that runs through the gold mine. The road's still there, but is owned by the gold mine and closed off now. And so they bought all that property. That was farmland. That was houses where people just lived and did their ordinary task. And so I kind of watched it as that thing grew, and they began to build a plant there. So modern technology and equipment gave them the ability to extract gold at levels like nobody could have done in the days that we've been talking about. And so in 2015, they merged with Oceana Gold, which is the name you'll see on it today, and they took up operations of it. And so in January 19 of 2017, 10 years after Remarco started that process, the first gold of the new Hell operation was poured. This is just an article and some pictures of that first pour when they poured the first gold bar from that mine. Here's a few pictures of what the mine has looked like lately. Some of the pits that started as open pit mining, and I believe they could go down as far as 1,000 feet. But you can see that big equipment down there looks pretty small. And so just the use of the machinery they have now, the technology, how it's changed. They have a lab there that is state of the art. And so it has come a long way. There's a few pictures here from a young man on YouTube, and I'll link that video. He did a flyover on it and took some photos, and I'll link his YouTube channel in the description or comments following this video. But if you see the holes there, those are open pits, just like the one I showed you up close. And we see those different ones, and some of them even have water in them now. And you can kind of get a sense of some of the size of it. So a closer look at one of the pits and the layers and layers as they go down. And so it's something to see with the massive machinery that goes in and out. And this is the processing plant, come a long way from the days of the 1800s. And so there's just a couple of night shots of it. These last two pictures, we'll get to those in just a moment. I'll tell you a little something about them, but just take note of these last two pictures here as we go on a little bit further. So expectations were to yield 150,000 ounces per year. And April of 1822, prices makes that 150,000 ounces worth about $300 million. But I believe, if I remember looking over the records right, I think every year they have exceeded that expectation. And also the price of gold has increased significantly, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on. But 1827 to 1862, the first 35 years of operations, they yielded $1 million worth of gold. And today's, that would equal about $35 million. That was over 35 years. So about $1 million a year in today's money. And so at that time, it took 35 years to get that $1 million. So 2019, 2 years after the first gold was poured, they applied for permits to expand their boundaries by 832 acres, and they were seeking permits to allow underground mining. And so now, at this current time, I tell you, remember those last two pictures, that was an entrance to one of the two. They have permits for two underground mines as well. And so there, 2023, they began mining in the underground. So 2021, they produced 190,000 ounces of gold. 2023, 170 to 185,000 ounces. And in September of 2023 is when they poured their 1 millionth ounce of gold. So we saw 2023, they began mining underground as well. Now, 2024 gold prices, current price, $2,600 roughly an ounce. And they estimate potential for another 2.5 to 3 million ounces of gold to come out of that mine. So you do the math, 1 million ounces of gold at $2,600, a little over $2.5 billion with a B. So that's what's been going on at the mine. So here, let's take a step back and look at something. When God created the world, guess where all that gold was? Yep, it's been there all the time. For centuries, people built houses on it, they built barns on it, they planted crops on it. They just did life. Just like my grandparents did life on it. And on top of that, what we know now, they were right on top of what we know is a great gold mine. And so God has a time for everything. In the 1800s, a million ounces of gold would have been worth about $20 million. At today's price, that's over $2 billion. So from where it started, when people discovered it, it's always been there, but they just discovered it, and look where it's come and what it was able to do. So take that picture frame. Take the story of this gold mine. Kind of a quick history of it. Hopefully it's quick. Put it in that picture frame. Hang on with me, and let's go a little bit further. Let me tell you a story that parallels that gold mine in many ways, but in my opinion, it's even more valuable than the story we just talked about. We've talked about a wonderful story from when Mr. Hale came and bought all that land, found gold while farming, and now look at what is taking place. Billions of dollars coming out of that, many people being employed, and so it's come a long way. But let me tell you the story of a godly man. Ed Hanna, born November 15th, 1962, Johnsonville, South Carolina. 1981, he graduated from Johnsonville High School, and in August of 83, Ed met the love of his life, Miss Retta Miles. 1986, he graduated Holmes Bible College here in South Carolina. And while he was there, he won the N.J. Holmes Award, giving in recognition of one graduate who best exemplifies the school motto, living for others. I'll just go ahead and say this up front. If anybody knows or knew Ed at any point, they would say this comes as no surprise. So in 1987, he was licensed as a minister in the South Carolina Conference of the International Pentecostal Holiness Church. Same thing, same ministry that I work with. 1989, that love of his life we talked about, October 21st, 1989, he and Retta married. 1991, they saw the first of their two children, their daughter their daughter Meredith, and 1997, their son was born, Whitman Reese. And Meredith and Whitman, I'll have a picture of them here just in a moment, had a beautiful family, still have a beautiful family. 1992, he was ordained in the International Pentecostal Holiness Church, and Ed served as in the South Carolina Conference for 30 years. Now, Ed also worked, before his passing, he worked for the Florence County School District 3 as a maintenance team, specifically in the Dr. Ronald E. McNair School of Digital Communication and Leadership, where he earned the respect of his supervisors and coworkers. He was known as a diligent, kind, and dedicated worker. It was said of Ed, every day his goal was to treat others with great kindness and respect. He did so in his quiet, humble, and patient manner. These are quotes from other folks. Ed loved world missions. Now, that's an understatement. And he was known for collecting roll quarters to donate to the cause. And I believe that even at his funeral, people were given the opportunity to bring roll quarters to give, because everybody knew Ed's love and passion for world missions and spreading the message. And that really has a lot to do with why we're here today. Ed loved the Lord. He loved preaching the word. And Ed loved his family and his wife, as I've mentioned. And it's hard to put it in one sentence and really get the passion for the love that he had for his wife and his children and his family. And Ed loved people in general. Ed loved people all the way around. There's a picture of his beautiful family. 1 Thessalonians 5:11 came to mind, thinking of Ed. Therefore, comfort each other and edify one another, just as you also are doing. That's what we hear from this Edification by Ed Hanna. He was there. He was always about building people up. That was his passion. That was his heart. And so in September 2021, Ed went to the hospital and with severe back pain. Now, nobody could have predicted what the next 2 months was going to bring. And when things seemed to be going in the wrong direction, Ed made it very plain. He truly trusted God to do whatever God chose to do. And much to my surprise and many others around, Ed went home to be with the Lord November 1st, 2021, just 2 weeks before his birthday. Now, here's my statement. Ed Hanna was one of the most selfless people that you could ever come across. There was never a time or situation that I'm aware of that he wasn't more concerned about what he could do for those around him than over his own needs. I've witnessed this personally as well. He was trying to help give something to me when in the midst he was doing something harder than I was doing. He came to me working and sweaty and wanting to go bring me something to drink. He was always looking to help somebody else more than himself. His love was genuine, without any kind of pretense. Ed never sought to be in the spotlight or have any attention placed on him. That may be one of the reasons he left behind such an amazing legacy. And I'm proud to sign that statement as Pastor Larry. But what else did Ed leave behind? That's what we want to talk a little bit about. So here's your second picture frame. We have our story of our gold mine there in our first picture frame. We've got a brief story of a great man of God here in this middle picture frame. But I still want to bring your attention to that picture. You see the hinges on both sides? Don't forget that those pictures are all connected. Those three stories that I'm telling you, they're all connected. And we're going to see how that picture comes together and how these connections are made as we go through just a little bit more. So let's get to the questions that you might have at this point. Now, here's what I believe you may be thinking. Number one, you might be thinking, well, who are you? And how do you fit into these stories? That's a fair question. Secondly, I thought maybe you're thinking, what does a gold mine in Lancaster County, South Carolina, just outside of Kershaw, have to do with Ed Hanna? That's a fair question as well. And thirdly, what does any of this have to do with me? So if you're thinking of any one of those questions or all of them, if I don't answer your questions in the next few minutes, just leave them in the comments, and I'll do my very best to answer whatever those questions might be. But I'm pretty sure I can answer these three questions. So let's get to the first one. Who are you? How do you fit in this story? Well, I'm glad you asked. I'm Pastor Larry Hancock. I've served as pastor at Landmark Pentecostal Holiness Church, and that's just north of Kershaw as well, for 21 years, along with my wife Jan. We've been married for almost 46 years, and I'll explain how I fit into this story a little bit more as we go through the last part of this picture. Let me start with this part. Family connections. No, we're not related, but this story, you couldn't tell this story without our wives. Ed's wife, Retta, my wife, Jan. Without them, there wouldn't be a story for me to tell. Without them, there wouldn't be a connection for us to have. So I'll try to make this brief and see if I can put it in a nutshell. But Retta and Jan met when they were, I'm going to say, early teens, maybe even preteens. And so my father-in-law and Ed's father-in-law, which at that time, I didn't know Jan, and I don't know if Ed even knew Retta, but they were definitely not married. But our future father-in-laws came together. Retta's father-in-law at the time was pastoring a church here in Lancaster, and my father-in-law had made contact with him, and they hit it off. They began to do some bird hunting together. Eventually got into church together. My father-in-law got called into the ministry later on and became a pastor for 24 years himself before going to be with the Lord. So Retta and Jan, as the daughters of these, in this situation for a few years together, got to know each other. And along with Retta's sisters, the whole Miles family. And I'm proud to say that Retta's dad, Preacher Miles, when Jan and myself got married almost 46 years ago, he's the one who performed our wedding as well. So they got connected there, and that's how we became connected. And so when Retta and Ed get married, of course, we already had that connection. And I can give you a long list of things over time of how we've stayed connected, even though for the last, 4 decades, we've lived about 80, 90 miles apart. They're just outside of Lake City. We're here in Lancaster, South Carolina. But we had a ministry connection as well. Ed pastored for 30 years. We've been pastoring for 21 years. And of course, conference functions, we would see each other. But we knew each other through family and did a lot of things together. And so I'm just kind of leaving it at that. But we got to know, we already knew the Miles family super well and got to know Ed and know him and love him. And so now let's see if we can put some of this together. 2020, the year we'll never forget, the year a lot of times we don't want to talk about. When a lot of churches were closed and canceled and going online. I'd never preached a sermon online until 2020. Now Ed was not he was not very friendly with computers and online, and so it was tough on Ed. He was pastoring a church at the time and not being able to be there with his congregation. And so Ed began to make some posts on Facebook. Now, he did type out some outlines and put them online. And I began to read those, and man, they were powerful. And sometimes they might be short, but whatever he put on there was powerful. And during that time, the Holy Spirit prompted me to do something that didn't seem to be possible. And that was to help Ed get his messages online somehow. because anybody that knew Ed would know that if I went and made and tried to make an offer to help him get on Ed doing a live like I'm doing now on Facebook, I knew that wasn't going to happen. And so I thought, well, maybe I could go through his daughter. Maybe I can go through Meredith and get her to help me figure out some way that we can at least get his messages on there. Because when COVID lightened up and they went back into the church, he wasn't online. Now, we stayed online because I've been preaching online, but I miss seeing those posts. But the Lord had really prompted me with this. And so I knew that what Ed had inside, what he was putting out, there was a lot more people needed to hear that. A lot more people needed to get that message. And so in September of 2021, when Ed's unexpected health problems hit, I told my wife, I said, when Ed gets to doing better, we're going to go down and sit down with him and see, because I just feel this pushing that I need to go and help him get that word out. But in November 1st, 2021, Ed passes, but the prompting continues. So Ed's going on to be with the Lord, but I still have this prompting, and it doesn't make any sense now because I don't have Ed there to get his messages. And so let me talk about the Edifications by Ed Hanna and how that was conceived a little bit. Because I began to think, well, there still must be something I can do. I knew we had the postings online. I knew there's probably some tidbits somewhere, and I figured maybe they had some of his message recorded. I didn't know exactly what, but I still felt like we needed to do something. And so I began to ask questions about that, to see, what may be available. So we get to that second question: what does a gold mine in Lancaster County, just north of Kershaw, what does that have to do with Ed Hanna? So let me tell you, this was an unexpected word to me. But I was at the time I was working in Turveyville, South Carolina, driving to the children's home there, and so either route I took me. Or two routes I took me by one side or the other around this gold mine, Hill Gold Mine. And so one day, I'm just going to read, because when I got done, the Lord just began to drop stuff in my spirit. And when I got to work, I sat down and wrote it down. So I'm going to read it to you just like I had written it out for the most part. While I was riding down Duckwood Road, just a few miles from home, I began praying over the ideas that God had planted concerning edifications from Ed Hanna. After praying a while, I heard myself saying, there may be someone on the other side of the globe that needs a nugget from God's word that you gave Ed. Then I pulled up to a stop sign and realized that across the intersection was the beginning of the property of Hill Gold Mine. My mind flashed back to my teenage days of driving through the dirt roads of an abandoned gold mine and seeing the remnants of the holes and dirt piles left behind from the gold being extracted in days gone by. And there's that picture. This is sort of what it looked like on those times I would drive through there. Then I looked and I saw the massive structure where gold is separated from the mountains of dirt and rock and processed until it can be poured into the gold bars. That massive plant that they have sitting there near the highway. Not far from there was one of the many towering mountains like piles of layers of multicolored dirt and rock that had been extracted. And Holy Spirit said, all the gold that has come out and is coming out of the ground has always been there. I deposited as I created the ground. And there's one of the pictures. Matter of fact, I just took that picture this week of what's still coming out of the ground there. And then it goes on to say, those that first discovered what was underneath the soil were blessed by its value, but had no idea of the vast supply that went well beyond their mind. So I didn't know it at the time, but I took that word to heart. I wrote it down. I held it close, and I knew God was still up to something. And so in conversations, we began to continue conversations with his wife, Retta. And I found out that Ed took notes. He wrote his notes down for his sermons. He would put his scripture. He put a little paragraph. And he would put his points. And I was told that he'd write that out. He'd pull it out of his Bible and lay it on the pulpit. And most of the time he would hit the floor and never look back at it. But he had it all in his heart, and he would just share that to the very end, hit every point right on target. But something that best I remember from the conversations, I don't think Retta actually even knew that Ed had taken many, many pages of his notes and took them away in binders until she came across them in his closet. And it was, there were, in each one of those binders, there were hundreds of pages of the notes that Ed had written, like hidden nuggets. The things that God had poured into him, he had preserved them. They were hidden away. Just like, I mean, the picture began to take shape. Just like God had placed the many nuggets of gold underneath the surface there at Hell Gold Mine, but they couldn't be accessed until the technology and the machinery was put into place. He poured into Ed Hanna nuggets of his precious word, and he hid them away for a time. But now, because of technology, these nuggets can be shared around the globe. I had no idea. God knew 2020 he had started this prompting. And so it's a couple of years into it before I even know these things are in existence, but God knew the whole time. So the picture begins to take shape just a little bit more. So there's your last picture of the connections, if you will, of we have the gold mine, we have Ed, then we see how God has used me. I'm nothing in this story but the administrator. I'm just the hands and feet of what God has done, what God deposited into Ed Hanna, and what he hid away for such a time as this, that now we can take the technology we have, and just like they're extracting gold out of 1,000,000 ounces they pulled out of there, and expecting 3 or 4 more million ounces to be pulled out of there at such a great price, and the price increasing. But what God had deposited into Ed Hanna is priceless. You can't put a price on that. He said, "My word will not return unto me void." And this word has already been used. It's already impacted lives. It's already impacted so many lives everywhere that Ed Hanna went, everywhere that he preached the word. But yet, there's still something that's so valuable and can be pulled from that. So we see the picture now. Do you see the frames? Do you see the gold mine and all the history of it? Do you see the little history I gave you? And I know some of you know the deep history, but if you never met him, hopefully it gives you a snapshot of what God was able to do in a godly man's life. And then we see how God takes those two and they're still connected. You see that that other hinge that connects that third frame, and how God begins to put this together for such a time as this. And so it's just been amazing to watch what God can do. Now, in that connection, what are we going to do with all of this? So if you're watching this today, you're either on a Facebook page entitled Edifications by Ed Hanna, or you're on a YouTube channel entitled Edifications by Ed. And so on this Facebook page and on that YouTube channel, we now have been able to take, because of technology, because of the modern technology we have, we've been able to take those hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages of notes and put them in digital form and put them in one collection from Genesis to Revelation. And so we're going to begin to take excerpts from that and share them on these pages. Now, what about that last question? What does all this have to do with me, referring to you that are watching? What does it have to do? So let me answer that question for you. How can you take part in sharing these nuggets? Because what we're going to do to begin with, we're going to, once a week, we'll make at least once a week, we'll make a post on there. But the idea is we need your help to share this video, to share the Facebook link, share the YouTube channel, wherever you're watching from, or share both. And you can have part in the online edification of lifting people up through the Word of God, and online evangelism, as we like to call it as well, when you share God's Word. Ed was a firm believer, just as I am, and what Paul had to say when he said, "I'm not ashamed of the gospel, because it is the power of God, even unto salvation." You have a wonderful opportunity, and it's one of the easiest things that you can do. You can do it from anywhere. You can do it sitting in your easy chair. So if you go to YouTube and you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to it, click that little bell, click the notification so you'll be notified when there's something put on there. And we'll start out just putting something slowly, because we don't want people to miss the majority of the content that and there's such a massive mine, if you will. There's even more valuable than gold that's been left behind in the handwriting of a godly man as God poured into him what he poured out to people. And now God is going to use that to reach people, as he had already shared with me 4 years ago, around the globe. Somebody on the other side of the globe is going to need a nugget from that word. And do you realize, I don't know when it would have been, and out of 30 years experience, out of 30 years of God speaking to Ed, he knows exactly when Ed spoke that word. He knows exactly what day that verse needs to pop up on that screen, and he knows exactly that person that needs to click on it and see it, and he is just that mighty to do it. And you can be a part of that. So you have an invitation to follow this page, to stay informed of what's going on it, and every time something comes on, just hit that share button, put it out there. The posts are going to be short. It's going to be like a little short devotional, not even a devotional, if you will, not very long. Most of them will be very short in nature, something you can look at and may eventually get to a daily post. But we're going to start out giving you some time to help us hit those share buttons, hit those things, and get them out there to be a part of what God is doing. I couldn't come up with a plan like this. There's no way I could have, in my wildest dreams, could I have come up with anything like this? Did I need anything else to do? Was I looking to make something up? No. I'm just the hands and feet that God has put that in my heart. And I will tell you, it didn't make any sense to me. How am I going to help somebody get online when you've already took them home to be with you? But God knew exactly what was underneath those nuggets that he had planted throughout the years and hidden them away, because he knew there was going to come a time when the technology and when the right time would come for such a time as this. And now we're able to share them with you and to be able to share them with others around this entire globe. So we thank you for taking out time from your day, no matter if you're watching this on replay or if you're watching along with us on the live. I want to say thank you for watching. Look for the Facebook page and the YouTube links in the comments. And don't forget to share Edifications by Ed Hanna, still leaving his mark on the world, still doing the work of the Father. It's amazing what God can do through one individual who has surrendered unto him. And now is your opportunity to let him do what he wants to do through you. May God bless you, God keep you, and keep on following along and sharing Edifications by Ed Hanna. And we're just going to see together. Listen, this is day zero. This is ground level that you stepped in on. And we invite you to take a part in this journey as we see where God has for it to go and where he leads with it. And we'll never know the lives that'll be touched. But we do know that God gets all the glory. He gets all the praise. And he has the ultimate plan. May God bless you. God keep you. I know he loves you. And we love you. Ed loved everybody he came in contact with. And may each one of us share that same smile that he always had and that same heart of love to reach those that are around him. Now, I'll close with this. November 15th, God saw fit for Ed Hanna to be birthed into this world. We thought it only fit to give birth today to this online ministry that God has left behind in honor of our friend Ed. So whatever you do, share this out. Help it go worldwide around the globe in honor of Ed's birthday. Happy birthday, Ed. God bless all of you.